So at this time, I'd like to introduce our pastor and sermon giver today. We are so lucky to have Pastor Adonia speaking today. She's going to be speaking about how do we become bigger people for initiatives that might be over our head. You know, we all have dreams, we all have hopes in our lives, but a lot of the times we feel like we might not be those people for it. And she's going to talk about how we can step up as individuals in our own lives. So let's welcome up Pastor Adonia.
Good morning, everyone. So wonderful to see all of you. How was your summer? I feel like today is the last day of summer because my kids go back to school tomorrow. So for me, it's the last day of summer. But did you all get to see the Perseid meteor shower last night? You do know there's a solar eclipse coming, don't you? Okay, all right. I was really happy that Mira is visiting us, and she was up for going up to Boulder yesterday, and we went out to the park, and we cuddled up in a blanket on the wet grass and tried to keep warm for about an hour while we watched for the meteors. But we saw a few really beautiful ones that went across the entire sky. And I just love these special aspects of nature because I feel like they're like, it's kind of like little treasures and surprises that God puts in nature for us to enjoy. You know, not every day is the same. There's always something different, and I really like to grasp a hold of these special occasions when I can. So if you can see the solar eclipse, don't forget about it. It's August 21st. I have to tell you, I've been very single-minded this week. I've had one thing on my mind this entire week. And that one thing is paddle racing. So some of you know I've shared about this a few times, and I'm going to share about it again. But 3 summers ago, my sister and I took, we did a paddle race. We did the longest nonstop paddle race in the world from Kansas City to St. Louis. It's 340 miles. You have to complete it within 88 hours. And so this week was this year's race. Of course, I wasn't participating, but I was watching it all on Facebook and just so inspired by the stories that come out of it. I wanted to share a couple just snippets with you. One was, I saw this picture on Facebook. This is a Chinese man who came to America fairly recently. He only learned to swim and kayak recently, but he decided that he wanted to do this race. And as you can see, the boat he has is like 7 feet long. It's really not a racing boat. It's kind of for sitting and fishing on a lake. But he was determined, and he did it. He did the whole 340 miles. Just out of sheer grit, and I just thought that was really inspiring. This is another picture. It's a little harder to see, but if you see the boat in the back, it's this huge boat. They built this boat for this race. It was a 3-man team, and 2 of them dropped out in the middle of the race. And this man paddled this huge boat all the rest of the way because he wasn't going to quit. And he finished the race dragging this like 200-pound boat behind him. So these are just a couple of the kind of stories that come out, but it just kind of lights my fire and gets me inspired. And actually, after we finished the race last time, actually at the finish line, we were like, we're never going to do this again, ever. So like never. And then 2 weeks later, we're like, so, are you ready to do it again? and we had decided that 2018 would be the year that we do it again. And so as this year's race was coming up, I kind of had it on my mind, thinking, you know, can we do it? Should we do it? And I'd actually almost come to the point where I felt like, you know, maybe it's too much. You know, we've got a lot going on. I have another kid now, and you know, we got a busy life, and I'm not even in Missouri, and Felicia's not even in Missouri. We'd have to train separately, and maybe it's too much. But as I was preparing to call her and tell her that it was going to be too much, I couldn't do it. And I started to think about all the experiences that we had in our race, and I finally called her and I was like, can we do this again? And so this week we committed to doing it again, and and everything kind of fell into place very quickly. We found a new boat and paid for it already, so it's happening. But anyway, I wanted to share a little bit of my story from the first time, because I know some of you have heard it, but some of you haven't. But I feel like that this race and kayaking to me is it is to me what I feel like fishing was to our true Father. Although the act in itself doesn't look like it has very much to do with God or providence or spirituality, there's actually so many life lessons that can be gained, and that I felt when you experience it, it really soaks into you, because you experience life lessons. It's not like you're being told them, you experience them. So I encourage any of you, if you haven't found something where you really connect, not just because it's fun, but because you really connect to life in this hobby or activity, find something. If any of you wants to join our race next year, let me know. We'll introduce you. So a little bit about our story. When it actually wasn't never my intention to do this race. I heard about it through this nature magazine in Missouri, and I knew that my sister was kind of looking to do something different, and I thought, well, maybe this would be for her. So I showed it to her, and I was like, oh, what do you think? And she said, wow, that's awesome, but I would never do it alone. And she looks at me, I'm like, oh, well. And but it was like a moment of inspiration, and we shook hands on it, and we committed to it. And then I was like, what am I doing? I have never played team sports. I had just had my third child. I haven't really never really exercised in my life, actually. I like to be outdoors, but I don't go to the gym or run more than quarter of a mile. And neither of us had ever done an extreme sport or anything like this before. So we really had to kind of do our research and buckle down. We had to raise money. We didn't have a tandem kayak. We had to get a boat. We had to get our registration fees. We had to get our lights and our gear and everything. And turns out the only boat that would suffice and that we could afford was in Key Largo. And so my sister, my mom, and my son took a road trip down to Key Largo, spent like 5 days and bringing it back. And then we started our training, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, so we'd put our kayak on the van, and we'd drive an hour to this nearby big lake, and we'd do laps across it for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and we'd do night paddling to practice for going through the night. And the whole thing was just really, it was almost a year's worth of preparation and building up not only our muscles, but our internal strength and determination. Whenever we did a road trip, I was determined that I would be the one who would drive all the way through the night and not fall asleep. And I took that as my practice for paddling through the night. Oh my gosh. And then the day of the actual race came. Oh, actually, on top of that, the race got postponed for a month. We were actually about ready to put our kayak on the van and drive to Kansas City for the race, and they put out the announcement that there's too much floodwaters. It's not safe to do it. We have to postpone it for a month. And we almost thought, well, gosh, I don't know if we can do this, because it was scheduled right after that year's BCSF. And so my sister was going to be in New York at the time and playing Frisbee. And so we had to raise extra money to get a plane ticket to fly her from New York to Kansas City, and then we'd start the next day. Anyway, the day actually came, and it was so exciting. There was 400 different boats, single, solo men's, solo women's, mixed tandem, men's tandem, women's tandem, like dragon boat with like 20 people in it, and stand-up paddle boat people, which are crazy. And we're all putting our boats into the water and waiting for the cannon. That's the start, and then we all paddle off into the sunrise. and it was like so exhilarating and so exciting to start. And we paddle. We're paddling hard, keeping up with the pack. And then about like 8 hours into it, it wasn't that much fun anymore. It was the longest either of us had ever paddled before, and very, very sore. But we were determined, so we kept paddling. And the first night, there was a couple places where most people are recommended to pull over and sleep for a few hours. And we're like, no, we're gonna pass all these sleeping people. We're gonna go through the night. So we paddled. The first day we paddled for 26 hours straight. We finally got to the next checkpoint. Mike, my husband, and two of my kids were our ground crew. They would meet us at the checkpoints and give us food and water and make sure we weren't going too crazy yet. So we finally pulled up to this checkpoint. And we're like, yes, we passed everybody. We're going to sleep for a couple hours, But already at that point, I was more sore and more tired than I'd ever been in my entire life. And so happy to sleep for a couple hours. But then you wake up after 2 hours and you're more sore. And all you have to do is get back in the boat and do it all over again. And you're not even close to halfway yet. That second day was probably one of the hardest days in my entire life. Because there was no more inspiration left. We weren't even halfway. And actually, both of us, we found out later. We never said it out loud, but both of us during that day were thinking, maybe it's time to call it quits. Maybe we're just not going to be able to make this. And we're in the kayak, and I'm in the front, my sister's in the back, and so I couldn't see this, but she told me she shed quite a few tears back there. Oh man, but we got over that day, we passed the halfway point, and then you feel like, okay, maybe we can do this, And we kept going, went through the second night, and the third day, and the third night, and in the end, we came in second place in our division, which was the women's tandem division, which was, thank you. Oh my gosh, but it was, anyway, it's hard to describe the kind of experience it was, but the point that I'm coming to, it's not just to tell a story, it actually does have to do with today's message, which I'll tie it back to in a second. But I sometimes think, what would it be like? I'm sure probably all of you have pondered this, what would it be like if humanity had never fallen away from God? What kind of a world would it look like? What kind of relationships would we have? What kind of a world would we be living in if Adam and Eve had never fallen, if we had never separated ourselves from God, if we were living with God every day? And so, basically for me, I go back to the principle of creation in the beginning of the divine principle. I think about, what kind of proper relationships would we have? What kind of relationships would we have with our parents and our spouses and our children? And I'm sure that in order to grow, right, there's still a challenge. It's not like we would never face any difficulties or never have anything to overcome. But I do feel like it would all be a forward progress. I think that there's a quote that our true father said one time that, humanity would have surpassed the stars long ago. I think we'd all be continually growing, deepening, expanding, and fulfilling our potential. I think for me, when I picture it, that's what I feel like, that's what life would be like. But as we know, the reality is that's not the world that we live in. And each of us does have a separation from God. We all carry the qualities of fallen nature in us. And I feel like what that means is that we all have some hooks. We all have some baggage that we're dragging around. We all have things that when we want to go forward, we feel like there's something that's holding us back, or we're about to take a step forward and then we trip over something. We're living in what the reality of restoration, basically. We're trying to come back to that point at the beginning when we are connected to God. And my mom has always said, restoration is a messy process. So what that looks like in our life is that, every person comes from a certain set of circumstances, right? We all have our experiences in life who shaped who we are. It may be, some of them may be better than others, but we all have difficult ones as well, whether it's the family that you grew up in, or maybe some of us grew up in poverty, or maybe some of us are from a race that has been looked down on, or maybe some of us come from a culture that's not very friendly towards women, or maybe you've just developed an attitude, or you feel like that you are not who you could be, right? And so we bring our circumstances with us to our life, and we bring it to the situations that we face. We respond to whatever happens to us, largely based on our experiences growing up. So knowing this, I feel like actually it's very good to understand this, because it allows us to have compassion for people, right? We discovered actually just this past week that we were walking back from the community garden or something, and the boys were racing, and they were excited to be the first ones to get in through the gate, so they dropped their scooters outside the gate and ran in, and they didn't bring their scooters in the gate. And a couple days later, we realized we don't have scooters. Somebody was opportunistic and took the boys' scooters. And they were sad, and part of me feels like, how could you do that? How could you take my boys' scooters? But at the same time, I realize that if I was that person, whoever it was, and I had grown up in their shoes, and I'd walked in their shoes, and I thought the way that they thought, and I felt the way that they felt, I would probably have taken the scooters too, So, and I think that God feels the same way. He knows us. God knows everything about us, in many ways, I think, better than we know ourselves. He knows our life. He knows our circumstances. And I think that God really has compassion for us, sometimes more than we have for ourselves, because he knows where we are. But I also think that God knows our potential and is calling us to go beyond these circumstances, to rise above, and to become who he really created us to be. So that's really what I want to talk about today. Because just as much as we have our fallen nature, right, in the divine principle, it explains how we're in a midway position, that because of the fall, Satan has his hooks in us. We have our fallen natures. We're born with them. But just as much as we have these fallen natures, we have this side of us that we don't like to think about, we've got our dark side, we've got our demons, just as much as we have that, we are also God's children. God is the one who created us. Actually, originally, before Adam and Eve ever fell, we were God's children. So that is really the core of who we are. In essence, we really have a divine nature, or you could say we are divine beings, despite this other side. I feel like that it's beautiful, but it's also where our struggle lies. Because if we were only evil, or if we only followed our own desires, if we only wanted to make ourselves happy, then we wouldn't struggle so much, right? But no matter how much we struggle with those things, we've got this part inside of us that's always nudging us, always calling us, even if it's quietly, to be our greater self, to be a reflection of God. So I was thinking, when are we really moved? What really moves and inspires you? Like if you hear a story, for me, thinking about these stories of these people on this race, that really moves me, inspires me, because I know the challenges that they had to overcome. If you watch any really good movie that people just agree is a good movie, contains a story like this, right? I think of one of my favorites is Remember the Titans, right? About this high school football team where races have always been segregated, but then they're brought together and they have to overcome all their differences, and they're not actually like that great of a team, but from all external points of view, there would be no hope for them, right? But through their overcoming their differences and connecting to their purpose and uniting together, they rise to the very top. I think anything that really inspires us and moves us is connected to people rising above their circumstances and showing us that we can do the same. Another inspiring movie that is more like financial, but I think is also really moving, is The Pursuit of Happiness. Have you guys seen that one? About this man who is really struggling to make it in life and to support his family, and his wife says, I can't take any more of it, and she leaves, and he's just trying to take care of his son, and they're homeless. And this is based on a true story, but he never gives up, and he finds an open door, and he gets his way in, and he also rises to the top. So I really love these kinds of stories, and I think that no matter how pessimistic you are, and some people are really drawn to like tragedies or things, but I think that everybody really connects to somebody who rises above their circumstances. On a much larger, perhaps more significant scale, we have really fantastic examples, one of which is really the life of our true parents and our true father. I was thinking about it, how our Reverend Moon was born into a small country hut in rural North Korea, right? Basically living in poverty, surviving through the oppression of the Japanese, surviving through the Korean War, being imprisoned. By all external accounts, it's amazing that he even survived all of it, right? But he didn't just survive, he thrived, and he created something that wasn't about him at all. He had a vision for the entire world before the world ever knew about Reverend Moon, right? And that vision carried him through all his difficulties and inspired thousands and thousands and thousands of people to believe in that vision and to commit to fulfilling it too. But I think, there were hundreds of thousands of North Koreans who grew up in a very similar situation to him. Kim Il-sung is one of them, right? And most of them just tried to do their best. They just tried to survive, right? My father's an example of really rising above, using the difficulties to propel him forwards. I have a quote here. This is from the Exposition of the Divine Principle, and it's from the section, The History of Restoration and I. As an individual, each one of us is a product of the history of the providence of restoration. Hence, the person who is to accomplish the purpose of history is none other than I, myself. I must take up the cross of history and accept responsibility to fulfill its calling. To this end, I must fulfill in my lifetime, horizontally through my efforts, the indemnity conditions which have accumulated throughout the long course of the providence of restoration, vertically. Only by doing this can I stand proudly as the fruit of history, the one whom God has eagerly sought throughout his providence. To become such an historical victor, I must understand clearly the heart of God when he worked with past prophets and saints, the original purpose for which God called them, and the details of the providential missions which he entrusted to them. Yet there is no one among fallen humanity who can become such an historical victor by his efforts alone. For this reason, we must understand all these things through Christ at the second advent, who comes to fulfill the providence of restoration. So this is really an amazing. It's just a few paragraphs, but it's really powerful and I think also empowering. In the beginning, it talks about how, I'll just go back. How each one of us is a product of the history of the providence of restoration. And you can see it this two ways. I think what it's expressing here is that God has been working throughout history to bring us to this point, right? There's been many generations before us who have been trying to find our way in life. God has been trying to work through their lives to accomplish something greater. And we're standing on all of that foundation, and we're poised to make the switch, to make a difference. But also, it also expresses that we are a product of history, right? On the flip side, we're a product of all the mistakes and all the frustrations and all the pain of the past as well, and we carry that with us. But it says, but I myself, nobody else can do this. Only us, because we're the product of history. We're the ones who are here now. We can't ask people in the past to change anything. We can't ask our descendants to change anything. Now is the time for us, right, to rise up to the occasion. What I really feel from this is that everybody has a capability inside of them. They have their God-given nature and their God-given potential. And no one is too far gone. For no one is it an impossibility to fulfill their potential. So how can we answer that calling, though? I know sometimes if I were to hear a message like this, I'd be like, oh, why did you remind me of my responsibilities and the weight of the world? But how can we answer that calling? How can we sever our bonds? How can we rip out these hooks? How can we leave our baggage behind that always seems to get in the way of true fulfillment and what we really want to do? So this is where I'm going to tie my story back in. As I mentioned, when we signed up for this race, we didn't have anything going for us. We weren't extreme athletes. We had no evidence that this was something that we could actually accomplish and do well. Our gear was no match for most of our competitors. But we decided to do it because we really wanted to do it. And that was it. And that carried us all the way through our whole year of preparation and to the race. But we actually had to go to an even deeper level on that second day. That day when we never spoke the words, but we were both thinking, this is it. We're either going to die if we don't, we're going to die if we don't quit. And this is something I didn't share. The only reason why we never spoke those words and made it a reality was because we knew that we had so many people who had supported us to get there. We had hundreds of people who had given a donation to us to help us to get our boat and to have enough gas money to get to Kansas City. And we had so many people who were praying for us and who had encouraged us and who were following us on Facebook and were sending messages of encouragement. And at every checkpoint, Mike was like, Teresa says you got this. And we had so many people who we felt were really invested in us. And it wasn't, because of that, it wasn't our race. And it wasn't something that we had power to give up on. And it wasn't just because we felt guilty, like, oh, if we give up, we'll let everybody down. But we really felt motivated to do this race for everybody who had invested into us. It was like winning it for everybody, So if we had just decided to do it all on our own, and it was just me and her, and we were facing those difficulties, it would have been very easy to give up. Because there's a certain point where your pride doesn't matter anymore, and our desire to win was gone, and it would have been perfectly acceptable for ourselves to say, that's it. But it wasn't about us anymore. So what I feel like it's very easy to feel stuck or to feel limited by your situation. I remember a lot of times when my boys and Mia were very young, I felt like I can't do anything. I can't even take a shower. How am I supposed to go do yoga when I can't even take a shower? How am I supposed to make dinner when I can't even go to the bathroom in peace? I really felt like it was almost like this. It was like a box I was in, because it wasn't real, but that was how I felt because of my kids. I felt like I can't do anything. I'm stuck. Maybe you have something where you feel stuck. Maybe there's something in your life where you feel like, well, I'm just not that kind of person, or I don't have what it takes to accomplish that goal. I'd like that, but I don't think I'm the right person for that job. Or maybe you'd like to have a certain kind of a relationship with your spouse. Maybe you've been with your spouse for 30 years. And you have an image in your mind of what you would like it to be like, but you feel like, oh, it's too late. We have all these ways of talking to each other and ways of being with each other that we could never change them. It's too late. I'm not pointing anybody out. But I know that we all have those things. We all have something where we sometimes feel like we just don't know if we're up for the challenge. What really helped me was asking myself, especially when I was in that situation with the kids, I then asked myself, well, okay, this is really, really hard, but is it impossible? Is there really no way at all that I could make dinner? Is there really no way at all that I could get away and do yoga? And I had to answer myself truthfully, well, no, probably if you organized a little bit better, if you asked for some help, there would be a way for you to do these things. And I had friends who I know were also in similar situations who were, pursuing other things and who felt that they could do more. And so I thought, well, it's possible for them. It probably is possible for me. Anything is possible. Actually, one quote you've probably heard this. It was really popular when Father was doing his speaking tours around the entire country and going to all the states. There was this one section of his speech where he said, where there is a will, there is a way, especially if it is the will of God. And I feel like there's two parts to that. You know, if there's a will, there's a way. That's where I feel like if you really want it, we really wanted to do this race. And out of pure will, we made it happen. But the second part is especially if it is the will of God. And I feel like that's really what pulled us through in the middle of the race. Not so much that we were thinking of God, but we were thinking of something much greater than ourselves, right? When we're thinking of something beyond just our own desires, and when we're really motivated for the greater good. It won't work if you feel guilty about it. It won't work because, I should do this for the greater good. But I really believe that we can find that in ourselves. Sometimes I feel like we get jaded or like, I'm tired of this for the greater good, living for the sake of others thing. It feels like a lot of pressure. But I really believe that when we connect to the core of our being, if we really take the time to find out who we are and what really lights our fire, that is also what lights God's fire, because you're not connecting to something selfish. When you really connect to who you are, you connect to who God is. And then it's the combination. It's what you really, really want, and it's for something greater, and it's for God. So I have another quote by, this is by our true father, Reverend Moon. Oh, wait a second. Oh, this is just a nice little one from Philippians. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. And when our circumstances are difficult, we must be determined to face these and win over them. You must know that you are going to be defeated in the long run unless you consider your circumstances and become able to either adjust or maintain your course through everything. There's a kind of a hidden thing here. How do you adjust or maintain your course if you don't know where you're going? What this is implying is you have to know your goal. You have to know what lights your fire. You have to know how it's connected to God. And then you can adjust or maintain your course through everything. How to digest and conquer your environment is the question. Don't ever try to escape from life, but feel challenged and persevere on your way. So I guess what I want to leave you with is this. If you don't know what lights your fire, or maybe you know, but it's a little bit dim, look back at that. This is what happened when I almost called my sister and said I wasn't going to do the race this year. My fire was dim. I almost let my circumstances overcome what I really wanted to do. But I took a little bit of time. We were actually driving from Missouri back here to Colorado, and I just revisited, why did I do that race in the first place, the first time? What kind of experiences did I have? Why were we so crazy to think that we would do it again when we were done? And I just reconnected back to each of those experiences and each of those moments. And by the 2 hours later, I was just like, I wish I could call her right now, only it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so I can't, But reconnect to what lights your fire, or find it. And it's never too late to find what lights your fire. And when you find that, you find the God in you. And when you really connect to that part of you, I believe that is what gives us the power to overcome the other side of us. Right? That is what gives us the power to go beyond our circumstances and become the person that can raise everybody else up as well. Because I feel like it only takes one person. It only takes one person like True Father who can then inspire everybody around him. And there's this quote called, "A rising tide lifts all boats," right? It only takes one person. So I hope you can reconnect or find that fire in you, whatever it is. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I have to be fundraising, or I have to be witnessing, or, oh gosh, I guess I should be the pastor, No, we are all made in God's image in our own unique way, and whatever your passion is, there is a way to do it for God and to inspire everyone around you. So be real to yourself. Don't try to fake it. Find what it is that lights your fire, connect to that, and be amazed by the power that you find. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pastor Donia. You really moved me, and I think that we all have some homework to do. We all have some challenges to understand ourselves a little bit better so that we can reconnect to God, whether in our work environment or our daily environment or whatever that may be. I was personally moved by, your testimonies and your stories and how you really can not only rise us all up, but I can see you rising really the nation up too as such incredible pastors. So let's have one more round of applause for Pastor Donia. Thank you so much. We're going to have the ushers walk down the middle aisle, and if you feel like you'd like to give back through tithing, there's envelopes in your front seat. You can give your offering through them, and then pass it to the basket. And once they get to the front, they're going to offer a prayer on behalf of their couple and for the community. So we have a couple of announcements to close out our program today. Our first one is that Dr. Ken, or Mr. Ken Habiara, will be visiting our community from August 20th to 23rd to talk about health and the divine principle, which is a really interesting overlap when you think about those two topics. And he'll be sharing a little bit more around the power of ginseng and the impact that it can have on your health. So he'll be speaking on Sunday at 1 p.m. on the 20th of August, as well as Monday at 7 p.m. and on Tuesday. So for those who have different schedules, you can join for those separate sessions there. And please see Ms. Hisako Geshwin for more details. So a really exciting and unique program coming up about health and divine principle in the upcoming week. Additionally, we have an opportunity here from Reverend Wantente, who will be speaking right here in the French Chapel from 9 to 10 a.m. And he'll be speaking in French and in English, which is an excellent offering, to those members of the community who'd like that delivered to them. And there's Divine Principle Study on the second and the fourth Sundays from 9 to 10 a.m. before service. So it's right here. If you're interested or know of anybody who'd prefer, to hear it in French and English and hear from such a unique perspective, please come out and support this event. This is the upcoming schedule for the 4-day and 7-day Divine Principle workshops in Las Vegas. As you can see, there's shorter ones, 4-day as well as 7-day. And if you have any questions or if you have interest, please talk to the pastors if you're interested in attending. And we have our founder, Reverend Yoon. We have a celebration for his passing, his ascension to the spirit world, and we'd like to celebrate that all together as a community. It's the 5th anniversary, and it will be on Thursday, September 7th. There's still some more details to come out about that, so we'll be sharing on future Sundays more details around this event. But we will be celebrating, and we wanted to let everybody know and give them a heads up about the 5th anniversary of his ascension. And there's plenty of opportunities to give back if you want to put your faith into action. We have these opportunities that we need support on. So if you'd like to, really plug into the community and really make it what you'd like, we have opportunities on Wednesday for beautification. We need Sunday service greeters, obviously, a cafe, and also on Sunday school. So if you're excited about any of these opportunities, please talk to Pastor Mike if you have any questions or would like to help out in those areas. And our last official announcement is that next week we have the Fleischer family, the Hentrick family helping out, and the Fleischer family will be cleaning, the Hentrick family is ushering, and we will be also having a community potluck. So if you could bring a nice dish to share, maybe your favorite dish, that would be really wonderful, as that's going to be next Sunday. So those are all the announcements I have to share, but we have two people who would like to give a special announcement, and I'd like to welcome up our community member, Anissa Tanaka, to come up and speak a little bit about a special announcement she is excited about. So let's all welcome up Anissa Tanaka.
Thank you. Hi. Well, the first announcement is regarding my daughter. Most of you know I have two. And my little one, Yoshiko, she has life-threatening allergies with food. There's a bunch of them, but ones that are extremely dangerous is nuts. So if she gets like trace, not even eat it, but just like in the air, or she inhales or licks something, she can have a cardiac arrest and just die there. So, sorry. I've been running like crazy preparing all the food for campers. So what I would like to ask you, I know it's a lot to ask, but if you can refrain from bringing any nuts to church while she is around you, this way we can keep her safe and she can come in a tent. And it's not like you just can pick out nuts. It's like, shouldn't be completely around her. And I know that we started distributed recently in our food bank, and yeah, it was very nerve-wracking for me, so please understand. The second announcement actually is I cannot give so much to time-wise to church because of my work, but I'm a hairdresser, so I know it doesn't look like it, but not today. I'm actually a trained hairdresser, and I'd like to offer services to all sisters and kids, sorry brothers. We can arrange Sunday maybe once or twice a week, twice a month, where we can come together and I can cut your hair, whoever wants, for free. And if you'd like to donate to church, it's fine too. So that's it. Thank you.
Amazing. So if any of your kids want to look great for the new year, you know who to talk to, right, for the new school year. Thank you so much, Anissa, and I hope we all can do our part in protecting your girl and making sure that she's safe and coming to church. Thank you. I have Dr. Hentrick, and then you'll give the third announcement. Okay, great. Let's welcome up Dr. Hentrick for a quick announcement.
Hi, everybody. I was asked to share a few minutes after lunch for whoever wants to hear it about how to use the Divine Principles Study Bible. So if that person and anybody else here wants to come for 10, 15 minutes, it doesn't take much time. I'll be sharing that at, 12:30 or 12:30? Thank you. Right here.
Thank you so much. And our last third announcement, let's welcome him up.
I don't know if you've been watching the news and keeping abreast of what's happening in Asia, but Kim Il-sung, the deranged leader of North Carolina, has for weeks... Let's try North Korea. I'm just seeing if you're awake. So he has been announcing for weeks and weeks and weeks that he is going to launch a major attack or some kind of show of force, much different than just launching a rocket. The middle of August. Well, this next week is the middle of August. Now, many of you know I'm spiritually open. I don't know if he's going to do it, but I would say it's a real possibility. And if he does that and the United States responds, which it will, It has been clear by all the people who've been studying and even talking to people in North Korea that he has lined up dozens of military strikes just north of the demilitarization zone, and they're all pointed towards Seoul, Korea, all of them. And the estimates are, if this takes place, and almost all of you have been to Korea, right? Through Seoul, you know how crowded it is, that at least several 100,000 people will be killed. And so I thought that, I can say my prayers, but I thought it would be helpful if we all maybe took 2 or 3 minutes and said strongly to prevent this type of thing from happening. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Kim Il-sung had a heart attack and fell over? But it just, but there's enough craziness going on in North Korea that this could happen, and it's scheduled to happen this week. So could I ask for 2 minutes of silent prayer in which we ask Heavenly Parent and Spirit World to do something to prevent this from happening. Oh, King Jil-woo. Yeah, he's the grandson. Mm-hmm. Okay, could we have a couple minutes of silent prayer and let Heavenly Father know of our desires?
Thank you so much. It's always humbled to, remember what's going on in the world, and also remember that we have a role to play in supporting, God's ideal outcome. And we also want to be a community responsive to, the interests and awareness of our community members. So thank you for coming up and for sharing something so deeply that's important to us in the world. So I'd like to actually close out our program today and ask everybody to stand up so that we can worship together in our final song. I'd like to welcome the band back up to the stage to close us out together in worship. Thank you.